My name is Justin Zimmerman, and I am the owner of Essential Business Systems. And what we do basically is provide custom solutions to the Macola reseller market. We're going to be talking about one solution in specific today, and that's Koperniko Reports. And it's a crystal reporting tool that we developed for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to get into that in the agenda. So I'm going to start with a little history of kind of how this developed, how we got into building this software. We're going to talk about some of the challenges with crystal reports. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to some of the things we'll talk about with deploying crystal inside your organization. And we'll talk about some of the other solutions that are out there and some of the downsides to those. And that really was what led us to develop it. Was, everything we saw that was out there kind of had some problems or some downsides to them. Talk a little bit about what really is Koperniko Reports, just a kind of a high-level overview of what it does. And then we're going to get into some detail on the concepts of what we do with Koperniko, some of the features of it. And then give you a little understanding of how the licensing works and what some of the requirements are to put it into your organization. And then I'm going to do a demo. We're going to actually build a report from scratch and see how easy it is to, once you write a report, how you can very easily deploy it to your users in your organization. And then we'll have a little wrap-up and a Q&A session, of course. So, we've been doing crystal reports since, I guess I started in about 1995. And we have customers actually that have been with us since then. And what we found was that over the years, new versions of Macola come out. Eventually there's a new version of Crystal that you have to deploy, with it. We started back in the day, I think we were on Crystal 6 or 5, something like that, 8.5, and now we're on 11. So you end up with a lot of versions of crystal reports out there. You end up with reports that you've put in folders all over your network. Sometimes people have shortcuts all over their desktops, or and new people come in. It just becomes almost unmanageable after you've been on Macola for quite a number of years, and you have 50 or 100 or a couple of hundred crystal reports out there, and you just don't know who has access to what, who's how the security is set on the folders on the network, things like that. It started to become unmanageable. And, then when we get into writing custom applications for people, we find that, if it's a pretty large application, not only are you going to be entering data, but you're also going to have reports written off of that application. And, if you want to add a report to your menu, it could be several hours worth of programming time or whatever just to add a report to the menu of a piece of software we've written. So, we wanted to come up with a way to make it very easy to add new reports to our software, or just in general for all the reports that you have going on. And then another big one, with the internet becoming de facto standard, people want to be able to run their reports anytime, anywhere. So accessing reports over the web has also become a big thing, and that's what kind of led us to develop Koperniko. So first thing I want to talk about a little bit is some of the challenges that probably a lot of you are facing with your crystal reports inside your company. The first one is how to get them out there for the people to use. With Crystal 8.5 and prior, you had the report compiler. So you could very easily just write a report on your desktop and create an executable out of it and put it out there so anybody could run the report. After Crystal 8.5, that is no longer an option. So, Crystal, or whoever owns it now, SAP owns it now, Business Objects owned it prior to SAP, and their ultimate wisdom decided that they were losing out on too much licensing revenue by allowing people to write a report, compile it, and put it out there at no charge for everybody to run. But then you also have the challenge of controlling access to who can run these reports. Put them out in a folder, give people a shortcut, things like that. It really is difficult to manage. And then with the licensing issues, without the compiled reports, anybody that wanted to run a report, basically they have to have Crystal on their workstation, and therefore, legally speaking anyway, they're supposed to have a license. So if you think about the number of users that you have inside your organization that need to run reports, that can get quite expensive. So there are solutions out there. There's quite a number of ways that you can get Crystal reports out there currently that work. They all have their downsides. And so I just wanted to run through a few of these. Number one is, you can install the full Crystal reports on everybody's workstation, but the downside to that is obviously you have to purchase a license for every person that's going to run reports. So that can get quite expensive. And when they're running the reports through Crystal, they can, if they pull it up, they could accidentally, move a field or delete a field. They can make changes to the reports typically, and a lot of times you really don't want that. So the other ways you can deploy, if you're a progression user, with Progression Workflow Explorer, you can add the reports as shortcuts out to your desktop, but you still have to have Crystal Designer to run those things. So it's still going to require you to have Crystal installed on your workstation. Now, if you have Macola ES, they actually have a way to put reports on the menu that works very well. You don't actually have to have Crystal on your workstation. You can put it on the menu, and it'll run through the same Crystal viewer that the canned reports that come with Macola ES will run out of. But the problem with that is that only people who have access to Macola can run those reports, because you actually have to be logged into Macola to run them. Therefore, the other X% of people in your organization that maybe need to run reports but aren't really Macola users can't do it. And also, you can only do it while you're in Macola. So that means if you're off-site or whatever, you cannot run those reports. So there's another solution out there. Crystal actually has a software called Crystal Enterprise. And Crystal Enterprise is actually quite similar to what we have. It's web-based. You can control security, things like that. But it's extremely expensive as you add users. I think the base cost to getting into it is something like $14,000, and then as you add users, it just gets extremely, extremely expensive, and it's very hard to deploy. It's not something that you can just kind of install and use for whatever reason. There's a lot of configuration, a lot of things like that go on with it, and it's a very viable option, but it's quite costly and hard to get going. There's also other viewers out there on the market. If anybody goes out there and searches, Crystal report viewers, there are some solutions out there that are, inexpensive ways to get people to run reports, but typically they're, just lacking a lot of features. It's hard to, you can't really control security, things like that. They're just there to kind of give you a way to quickly run a report. So what we did was we came up with the software called Koperniko Reports, and it is pronounced Koperniko. It's not Koperniko. Oops, sorry. Koperniko is actually the Spanish last name of Nicholas Copernicus. Long story behind that. I almost wish I hadn't named it that because nobody can pronounce it, but it is Koperniko Reports. And it's basically a web-based Crystal reporting tool, and you'll see this as we get into it. It allows you to categorize all your reports and deploy them throughout your organization through a web browser. So it's very simple, very easy to set up. You're going to see it when I do the demo. And people can access it, obviously, because it's web-based in the office or from home on the road. If you set up your internal network to have access from the outside, then you can really get to your reports anytime, anywhere. So I want to talk about some of the concepts and features that you're going to see when we do the demo. Number one, it is web-based, as I mentioned. So, I just want to reiterate, you can run these reports anytime from anywhere you might be, as long as you have internet access. You can set it up so that you can access your reports on the road, at home, at work, whatever. And we use integrated Windows authentication, which means that if there's any Synergy users out there, you guys can probably relate to this. If you're inside your network, you don't have to log in. it knows who you are, and it presents you your menu based off of who you are. If you're logging in from outside of your network, you do log in just like you would with eSynergy or any other web-based authentication. One of the very nice things that we built into this is the ability, if you run multiple companies in Macola, to use the same report across all the companies. And we have a lot of customers out there that have 2, 3, 4, or however many companies that they run out of Macola. And typically when you're writing Crystal reports, if you want to make it very easy for your users to run the reports, you would write a report and you have to point it to a database. So if you write it for company 1, then if somebody wants to run it for company 2, either they have to know how to repoint it to a different database, which is a little complex, or you have to create another version of the report. So one of the features you'll see is how we can take the same report and run it against multiple companies inside of Macola. Additionally, you can categorize them. So, the whole thing with having to put your reports out there in different folders, if you're, how you're doing it today, categorizing by type, maybe you have inventory reports, maybe you have sales reports, production reports, things like that. We can actually create report categories. So when you run reports, you'll actually see the different categories of reports and drill down through that category to actually run the reports. As far as security goes, this is one of the big features, is how you can control access to certain reports. We have a concept called roles inside of the software. So when you add your users, you can assign them one or multiple roles, and the roles determine which reports that they have access to. And additionally, inside of that role, you can control, if you do have multiple Macola companies, which companies they're allowed to run reports against. So if you have a salesperson for company 1, and you have a bunch of sales reports out there, but you don't want them to be able to run them against company 2, it's very easy to do. Another thing you can do, and I'll show you this in the demo, is we've recently added a feature where you can bypass the whole user interface for Koperniko, and every report has what's called a URL tag, where you can actually take that tag and you can put it as a favorite inside of Internet Explorer or maybe inside of eSynergy if you use that, and you can actually then go directly to the report and bypass the main menu. And then, of course, when you're running the reports, you can view them to screen, print them, or export them to various formats, just like you're probably used to right now. If you're a Crystal user, you can export to Excel or Adobe or Word or things like that. So before we get too deep into the demo or things like that, just wanted to give kind of a brief overview of what some of the requirements are. The software runs on Windows Internet Information Server. So IIS we run on 32 or 64-bit, and we're compatible all the way up to the latest, which is Windows Server 2008. You do have to own a at least a single user copy of Crystal 11, which is the current version that's supported by Exact, and that's basically for compliance reasons. We're technically, as a business objects reseller, or I guess SAP now reseller, we can't really sell it to a user that does not actually own Crystal 11. And one of the things as far as how we license it that makes it a very compelling option against Crystal Enterprise is that you pay one rate, and that gives you unlimited numbers of users. So with Crystal Enterprise, as you add users, it really gets extremely expensive. With ours, you can add unlimited numbers of users. You can have 100 people able to access it, and it's the same price. And we do have an annual maintenance fee that covers updates to the software, patches, things like that.